Part 1, The Realization. Ethan had always trusted Claire, his wife of 10 years. Their suburban home was filled with laughter and shared memories, a testament to the life they had built together. But lately, something about Claire felt off. Her laughter came less freely. Her gaze seemed to linger elsewhere, and her once devoted attention to him had been replaced by a fixation on her phone. It started with small inconsistencies, nights when Claire claimed to be working late, only for Ethan to notice no corresponding projects. Then there were the girls' nights that didn't align with the group chat messages he stumbled upon on her computer. She was becoming a stranger, an enigma wrapped in her evasive smiles and vague excuses. Ethan's mind turned with possibilities, none of which offered solace. He accepted. One evening, Claire's alibi cracked wide open. She claimed to be at a late meeting across town, but her phone pinged in a completely different location, a cozy cafe known for its secluded atmosphere. Ethan's heart tightened as he opened her laptop, an action that felt both invasive and necessary. The screen revealed emails and texts that painted a vivid picture of betrayal. The name Mark stood out in bold, a man Ethan had never met, but now felt he knew too well. Photos of secret meetings, messages dripping with innuendo, and plans for their next rendezvous were laid bare before him. Ethan's calm exterior faltered as rage bubbled beneath the surface. But he didn't confront her. Not yet. No, that would be too easy, too kind. Instead, Ethan's thoughts turned dark. He envisioned justice. Not the blind, immediate outburst of a scorned husband, but a methodical unraveling of Claire's life. If she had dismantled their marriage piece by piece, he would return the favor. He decided to take his time, to build a meticulous plan that would leave no room for her to escape the consequences of her actions. He has full control of her life. She loved him, and she knew it, and if she didn't leave the house, he would leave too. Claire was lonely. That night, Ethan installed a small hidden camera in the cabin Claire frequented, a place he discovered through her emails. It was the special place where her affair with Mark unfolded. He planted it not out of hope, but to arm himself with irrefutable evidence. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about retribution. The first playback of the footage left him cold. Claire and Mark appeared carefree, their laughter a sharp contrast to Ethan's turmoil. He felt a mix of fury and grim determination. They didn't just betray him, they desecrated the very trust he had placed in Claire, a foundation built over years, now crumbling to dust. Ethan sat alone in their darkened living room, staring at the flickering screen of his laptop. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same technology Claire used to cheat had now become his weapon. He closed his laptop, his mind abuzz with plans. But before he could log off, that was when he awoke in the middle of the night to the ring in his ear. The words, "He did the right thing," came across rapidly. At the same time as they were asleep, Claire got a message from her friend Lily, saying she would be there until noon. She gave her directions, asked for permission to visit her village, and told her to watch. She had been waiting for this moment all day. The Ethan who trusted, who hoped, who forgave, he was gone. In his place stood a man ready to burn the carefully constructed facade of their lives to the ground. Ethan didn't rush. Confrontation, as tempting as it was, would only lead to excuses, tears, and half-hearted promises. Claire had to face the full weight of her choices. His plan demanded patience, precision, and a cool head. He began methodically, starting with the cabin, the sanctuary of their betrayal. The footage confirmed everything. Claire and Mark greeted each other like lovers reunited after a war. They laughed, touched, whispered secrets Ethan could only guess at. He forced himself to watch every second. Each frame stoked the fire within him, but also hardened his resolve. Emotion would have to wait. For now, he needed to stay sharp. He archived the footage carefully, labeling each file by date and significance. Every piece of evidence became part of his arsenal. Photos of Claire walking into the cabin with Mark, screenshots of flirtatious texts, audio clips captured from a hidden recorder he placed under the table where they often sat at the cafe. Ethan became a ghost in their world, his presence invisible but his grip tightening around their oblivious necks. "Hey," he said, it wasn't enough to just gather proof of the affair. Ethan wanted to destroy the life Claire and Mark had built in secrecy. but he also wanted to expose their moral rot to the world. He dug into Mark's background, discovering more than he expected. Mark wasn't just a smarmy charmer, he was a fraud. Mark had been embezzling funds from his small marketing firm, falsifying reports to keep investors in the dark. He thought he was crazy, and he wanted to ruin Mark's life with his bad life. It was crazy, and he wanted to free others from the same fate. Ethan couldn't help but smirk. Mark's arrogance wasn't just his personality. It was his Achilles heel. Using burner accounts, Ethan began leaking details of Mark's shady dealings anonymously to the right people. Journalists, disgruntled former employees, and even law enforcement. But he didn't unleash everything at once. Each leak was timed, calculated, and designed to chip away at Mark's image while still giving the man enough rope to hang himself. Meanwhile, Ethan turned his attention to Claire. He wanted her to feel the walls closing in on her carefully curated life. It began subtly misplaced documents at her office, emails that mysteriously failed to send, and minor but persistent errors in her presentations. Ethan had hacked into her work computer and manipulated files, eroding her confidence and planting the seeds of doubt in her colleagues' minds. And Mrs. Claire told me generally through her boss that Ethan had literally stolen her previous husband from her in the middle of his life and stolen her room and for the greater pleasure of her previous husband. Meanwhile, Ethan turned his attention to Claire. He knew that if something happened to her, that the cabin remained central to his strategy. It wasn't just a hideaway for Claire and Mark. It was a place imbued with significance. They thought it was their secret, their safe haven, but Ethan would make it the scene of their reckoning. Every time he watched the footage, he memorized the layout of the cabin, the way Claire leaned into Mark's embrace, the smugness on Mark's face as he poured her wine. Ethan watched and wondered just how Mark had found it. Fed, seated on the grassy ridge of the hollow, across from a small house, stared at the view of the river and set his watch. These details weren't just fuel for Ethan's anger, they were ammunition for his final act. He carefully prepared for their next meeting. By now, he had learned their schedule. He knew which days Claire would claim to be working late and when Mark would clear his calendar for their stolen moments together. When the time was right, Ethan would be waiting. Yet Ethan's plan wasn't just about catching them in the act. It was about stripping away every layer of their lies, ensuring there was no escape. He imagined the look on Clara's face when she realized the depth of his betrayal matched her own. He wanted her to understand not just the consequences of her actions, but also the enormity of the effort he'd put into dismantling her life. In the weeks leading up to the confrontation, Ethan maintained a facade of normalcy. He still kissed Claire goodbye in the mornings, still smiled when she returned home late, carrying the faint scent of Mark's cologne. But inside, he was cold, calculating. His restraint was both his shield and his weapon. What Claire and Mark didn't know was that Ethan had arranged for an audience for the final confrontation. Friends, colleagues, people whose opinions mattered most to them. Ethan would bring them all to the special place. He would pull back the curtain, expose the truth in front of everyone they thought they could deceive, and leave them standing in the wreckage of their own making. Finally, Ethan said to me, "Ethan, what are you doing?" Terry patted Ethan on the back, saying he had said something stupid, setting off in anger as he did so. Ethan shook his head, but said, for now, though, Ethan watched and waited. Each day brought him closer to his goal, and with every passing moment, he felt less like the man who had been betrayed and more like the architect of their ruin. John Stockton, Starlight, written by Reggie Allen, narrated by Eric Shotley, and performed by John Stockton. The air seemed heavier the closer Ethan came to the date he had chosen for the confrontation. By now, every piece of his plan had fallen into place like the final strokes of a master painting. Yet the hardest part was maintaining the charade of normalcy at home. Claire remained oblivious, wrapped in her fantasy world with Mark, blind to the quiet storm Ethan was preparing. Ethan's evenings became a careful choreography. After dinner, he would retreat to the garage, claiming to be working on a long-neglected woodworking project. In truth, he was assembling a series of hidden cameras and microphones to capture every angle of what he now referred to as the reckoning. The cabin had become the centerpiece of his revenge, but it wouldn't end there. Ethan wanted to ensure the aftermath of this event spread far beyond those walls. Stupidly unaware he was about to lead her into a robbery, Ethan wanted to install a high-profile camera and microphone. The first step in his setup was gaining access to the cabin without tipping off Claire or Mark. He knew the property well by now, its tucked-away driveway, the old oak tree that marked its entrance, and the spare key they hid under a potted fern by the front steps. One afternoon when Claire was away, Ethan drove out there, his heart pounding as he approached the cabin like a shadow creeping into forbidden places. The lonely mountain ranch in Alabama. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and pine, a cozy contrast to the turmoil churning in Ethan's chest. He methodically placed small, nearly invisible cameras in the main living area, the bedroom, and even on the porch where the lovers often shared wine. Each camera was equipped with a live feed feature, allowing Ethan to monitor the unfolding drama in real time. Before leaving, he made one final addition, a letter tucked neatly inside a drawer in the bedroom. It was addressed to Claire and Mark, written in Ethan's cold, precise handwriting. The letter wasn't a direct threat. It was a riddle, a hint at the storm about to break. It read, "Every lie you tell builds a house of glass. You might want to step carefully." Signed, An Observer. Ethan imagined the confusion and unease it would spark and allowed himself a rare, grim smile. The next step involved the guest list. Ethan had spent weeks compiling a list of people he knew Claire and Mark respected, or in some cases feared. Claire's boss, Sarah, who valued loyalty above all else. Mark's biggest investor, a no-nonsense businessman with little tolerance for scandal. A handful of mutual friends who had always admired Claire and Mark's sparkling connection. These were the people who would witness the unveiling. Until recently, Claire had trained troopers who would be the first injury. These were the people who would witness the unveiling and would laugh at it. These were the people who would witness the unveiling and would laugh at it. These were the people who would witness the unveiling and would laugh at it. These were the people who would witness the unveiling and would laugh at it. These were the people who would witness the unveiling and would laugh at it. These were the people who would witness the unveiling and would laugh at it. The whistle, twitter, the murmur, the nickname, and so on. They received carefully worded invitations to an exclusive event with only the address of the cabin and a time. Ethan knew the risk he was taking. Publicly orchestrating the downfall of two people wasn't without its dangers, but he had come too far, endured too much, to back down now. His anger had crystallized into purpose. This wasn't about pettiness or spectacle. It was about justice, about ensuring that neither Claire nor Mark could hide from the consequences of their choices. And as the day of reckoning approached, Ethan's preparations became surgical. He coordinated with a private investigator to ensure the evidence he had on Mark's embezzlement was ready to be shared with the right authorities. He double-checked the audio recordings and video files, meticulously editing them into a seamless presentation. He also made arrangements for a projector and screen, ensuring his proof would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. The morning of the confrontation arrived with an eerie calm. Claire kissed Ethan on the cheek before leaving for her business meeting, her lies by now as reflexive as breathing. Ethan watched her drive away, his stomach churning, not with doubt, but with the weight of inevitability. He spent the rest of the day rehearsing his lines in front of the mirror, perfecting the calm, controlled delivery he would need to wield like a weapon, the task over which he felt great satisfaction. Not with doubt, but with assurance, the calm and controlled delivery he would need to wield like a weapon. As twilight fell, Ethan made his way to the cabin, arriving early to ensure everything was in place. The secluded property, bathed in the fading golden light, looked almost serene. Ethan took a moment to steady his breathing before entering. He adjusted the cameras one final time, checked the microphone connections, and set up the screen for his presentation. Then he waited. One by one, the guests began to arrive, their curiosity and confusion evident. Ethan greeted each of them with a calm smile, offering no details, but assuring them they would understand everything soon. Claire's boss frowned as she entered, glancing around the rustic interior. "Ethan, what is this about?" she asked. "Patience," he replied, his voice steady. "All will be revealed." Did you know we have guests? Patience, he replied, his voice steady. All will be revealed. Finally, Claire and Mark arrived together, laughing as they exited Mark's car. The sight of them, so comfortable in their deceit, rekindled Ethan's anger, but he swallowed it down. They didn't notice the other cars parked discreetly along the driveway, nor did they question Ethan's presence as he stood on the porch, greeting them with an unnerving smile. "Ethan," Claire's voice faltered. "What are you doing here?" Come inside," Ethan said, his tone so calm and made her pause. "There's something you both need to see." The moment they stepped into the cabin, the atmosphere shifted. The guests stood silently, their expressions a mix of confusion and anticipation. Claire's face turned pale as she realized who was present. Mark, ever the opportunist, tried to play it cool, but even he couldn't hide the flicker of panic in his eyes. Ethan locked the door behind them with a deliberate click, then turned to face the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice cold and measured, "thank you all for coming. Tonight we will be peeling back the layers of a story built on lies. Tonight we will be talking the life of Robin Pearl." With that, he dimmed the lights and started the projector, the first images flickering onto the screen. A stolen kiss between Claire and Mark outside the cafe. Gasps filled the room as Ethan prepared to deliver the rest of his carefully constructed reckoning. As the projector flickered to life, the room plunged into an oppressive silence, all eyes fixed on the screen where the grainy footage of Claire and Mark's affair began to play. It started innocuously, Mark pulling Claire into a warm embrace outside the cafe, but soon escalated. The soft murmur of their laughter and whispered words filled the room, each sound punctuating the weight of their betrayal. Ethan stood at the front, the remote control a steel rod in his hand, his face an unreadable mask. He felt their collective reactions ripple through the room. Claire's horrified gasp, Mark's sharp intake of breath, and the stunned whispers of the invited guests. The evidence was irrefutable, and Ethan had structured it with the precision of a legal argument. Meticulously worded word for phrase, accuracy, precision, and scope. The screen shifted to footage from the cabin. Claire and Mark, their movements intimate, unaware of the invisible observer. The room's atmosphere grew heavier with every passing second. Sarah, Claire's boss, leaned forward, her lips pressed into a thin line. Mark's investor crossed his arms, his jaw tight. The mutual friends who once admired Claire and Mark exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. "What the hell is this?" Mark finally broke the silence, his voice rising in a blend of panic and anger. Ethan turned to him, his expression calm but icy. "This," he said, gesturing to the screen, "is the truth you both tried to bury. I thought it only fair to share it with the people who trusted you," Deanne said. Claire stood frozen, her face drained of color. "Ethan, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like," she stammered, her words clumsy and hollow. Ethan's gaze snapped to her, sharp and unyielding. "Don't insult my intelligence, Claire. It's exactly what it looks like. You built your entire relationship on lies, and now it's time for you both to answer for them." The screen switched again, this time showing Mark's financial records. Ethan had meticulously highlighted the fraudulent entries, detailing the funds Mark had siphoned from his own company. Ethan's voice was clinical as he explained, "Mark, while you were busy playing the charming lover, you were also stealing from your investors. I've sent this evidence to the authorities. I imagine you'll have plenty of time to reflect on your choices once they catch up with you. The truth is, Mark, when they read my title and who I really am, their mishaps are greatly diminished. Being part of this community makes me want to speak the truth." Mark's face turned an ashen gray. "You're bluffing," he spat, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "This is nothing but a desperate attempt to humiliate us." "Desperate?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "No, Mark. Desperation is sneaking around with someone else's wife, hoping no one notices. This is justice, and I assure you, the authorities will take it from here." Mark lunged forward as if to grab Ethan, but the room's tension snapped like a whip. Sarah stood abruptly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Sit down, Mark," she said, her tone commanding. "I'd like to hear the rest." Ethan smirked. "Thank you, Sarah. There's more. The next slide displayed Claire's deteriorating work performance. Missed deadlines, plagiarized presentations, and emails Ethan had subtly tampered with. He had planted doubts in her colleagues' minds for weeks, and the culmination of that effort was now on full display. "Claire," he said, his voice dripping with feigned sympathy, "you've been so distracted lately. I thought it best to shed some light on why." The squinted tears streamed down Claire's face as she turned to Sarah. "Please, you have to understand. Ethan's manipulating everything. He's twisting the truth." But Sarah's expression was unmoved. "The truth is already twisted, Claire. You did that yourself." Ethan relished the flicker of realization in Claire's eyes as the gravity of her choices finally registered. Her career, her reputation, her entire world, everything she had worked so hard to cultivate, was crumbling. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. She was 15 years old, and it had no use left in the world trying to get better. For once she was 15, her career was over, and her reputation, her entire world, everything she had worked so hard to cultivate. "You've made your point," Mark snapped, his earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of the evidence. "What do you want, Ethan? Money? An apology? Tell me, so we can end this circus." Ethan's eyes darkened. "What I want, Mark, is for both of you to feel the weight of your actions. You stole my trust, my marriage, and my dignity. Now I've taken everything you hold dear." As if on cue, the projector clicked off, plunging the room into dim light. Ethan moved to the center of the room, addressing the guests directly. "You've seen the truth. What you do with it is up to you. But let this be a lesson. Lies always come to light." The guests began murmuring, some standing to leave. Sarah approached Ethan, her expression grim but approving. "You've exposed them, Ethan. Now let's see what justice does." Mark and Claire were left standing in the cabin, their shock morphing into despair. Claire reached out for Ethan, but he stepped back, his voice cold and final. "You built this house of lies. Now watch it burn." Without another word, Ethan turned and walked out, leaving the cabin and its ruins behind. Outside, the cool night air felt like liberation. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath as the weight of years of betrayal lifted from his shoulders. The sound of his footsteps faded into the distance as he left, finally free. The night of the confrontation lingered in Ethan's mind like a vivid painting, every detail etched in sharp relief. As he drove away from the cabin, the distant murmurs of stunned guests and the broken silence of Claire's sobs faded into nothingness. It was over. The life he had known, the man he had been, the marriage he had once cherished, they were all ashes now. What lay ahead was uncharted, but it was his to claim. In the days that followed, the fallout unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. Claire's once glowing reputation as a creative professional was tarnished beyond repair. Whispers spread through the office like wildfire, and soon her colleagues began distancing themselves. Sarah, her boss, quietly suggested she resign to avoid public embarrassment. Claire packed her things in silence, the walk from her desk to the exit feeling like a long march toward exile. At the door, she stuck her hands out, staring at her fingers, wondering what the hell was going on in her life. Upon approaching first base, Claire pulled out her phone and just looked straight at a camera, waiting for an instruction. Mark fared no better. The evidence of his embezzlement had reached the authorities, and within days, investigators descended on his company. News of his arrest hit the local papers. His mugshot splashed across headlines that painted him as a criminal mastermind brought low by his hubris. Investors pulled their funds, and his business crumbled, and the luxurious life he had flaunted so proudly evaporated in an instant. Ethan kept his distance from it all. He didn't need to revel in their downfall. Knowing justice had been served was enough. He returned to the quiet rhythms of his life. But it wasn't the same. The house he had shared with Claire felt suffocating now, every corner a reminder of her betrayal. Ethan made the decision to sell it, listing it quickly, and relocating to a smaller, more modest home on the edge of town. His new home was a stark contrast to the suburban perfection he had left behind. It was quiet and surrounded by trees, the kind of place where solitude felt like a gift instead of a burden. Ethan took up hobbies he had once neglected, woodworking, painting, and hiking through the forest trails nearby. The world felt both larger and smaller now, as if he was rediscovering it through fresh eyes. Ethan was lost for words when he heard the rattle of the trail cameras wrapped on his front porch. He noticed a fallen tree wrapped around his feet and hunched over to peck at the wounds, burglared his kneecap. Therapy became a regular part of Ethan's routine, not out of weakness, but a desire to make sense of everything. His therapist, a gentle but firm woman named Dr. Marlowe, helped him process the anger and grief that still lingered. Forgiveness, she had told him, isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself. Ethan wasn't ready to forgive Claire or Mark, not yet, but he was learning to let go of the bitterness that weighed him down. Weeks turned into months, and life began to rebuild itself in unexpected ways. Ethan reconnected with old friends he had drifted away from during his marriage. They welcomed him back warmly, offering camaraderie and laughter he hadn't realized he missed. He also started volunteering at a local community center, teaching woodworking to teenagers. The work gave him a sense of purpose, a way to channel his energy into something meaningful. He felt far more successful afterward than he would any other way, and he personally wished more people could have those kinds of experiences. One evening, while working on a piece for the community center, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was an email from Claire. The subject line read, "An apology." Ethan stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The message was short and filled with regret. Claire admitted to her mistakes, acknowledged the pain she had caused, and expressed hope that one day Ethan could find it in himself to forgive her. There was no plea for reconciliation, no attempt to excuse her actions, just a simple, raw acknowledgement of her guilt. Ethan closed the email and leaned back in his chair. He felt no anger, no satisfaction, only a quiet sense of closure. He didn't reply. Some doors, once closed, were best left that way. The final thread of his old life unraveled on a crisp autumn morning when the house was officially sold. As Ethan signed the last of the paperwork, he felt a surprising lightness in his chest. The house, once a prison of memories, was now someone else's fresh start. Standing before the house, Ethan saw himself being told they wouldn't see each other again for more than a year, 9 months. As Ethan signed the last of the paperwork, he felt his heart slow down and his mind clear. Ethan stood on the porch of his new home that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. He wasn't naive enough to believe the pain was gone. He knew healing wasn't a straight path. But for the first time in a long while, he felt something unfamiliar yet welcome: peace. "Why do you do what you do?" Ethan asked. Ethan sighed. "Who knows? I was made for this world when I lost my family many years ago." He sighed. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Ethan raised a glass of whiskey to his future. He had been betrayed, shattered, and rebuilt. Now he was free.